Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome aboard. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Today we're diving deep into the world of Kenyan politics, but with a twist.
Oh, a twist?
Yeah, you see, we're going to be using the recent and, quite frankly, shocking outcome of the 2024 Botswana election to try and understand what might be in store for Kenya in 2027.
Okay, so using Botswana as like a case study, a model?
Exactly.
Interesting.
So we have this fascinating research excerpt, Kenya and Botswana predicting the 2027 Kenyan election. And it really makes you think.
Yeah, predicting elections is always a tricky business. So many factors at play.
It is tricky, but this excerpt makes some interesting comparisons that I think are worth exploring.
Okay, I'm all ears, lay it on me.
Well, for starters, both countries are former British colonies, around the same size, but the source goes deeper than that.
Deeper.
You know,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It points out how both Kenya and Botswana have these really prominent families, the Kenyatas and the Kamas, who've had a huge influence on their country's politics, almost like a dynasty.
Dynasties in politics, it's a tale as old as time, isn't it?
It really is. And it's not just that they were influential, it's the way they keep coming back into power after decades. Like, why is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It suggests there's something about the power structures in both countries that allows these families to retain influence even when they're not directly in control.
Right. Like, is it access to resources, control over institutions, or maybe even like a hold on the collective memory of the nation?
All of the above, perhaps. I think it's worth pondering, and the source actually points out a pattern in the first three presidencies of each country.
Oh, really? What can pattern?
Founding fathers, followed by less prominent figures, and then these London-trained economists, Mogai in Botswana and Kibaki in Kenya.
Huh. Interesting. Both brought significant economic progress, but then...
But then, the dynasties return. Kama takes over in Botswana in 2009, and almost simultaneously, Uhuru Kenyatta becomes president in Kenya in 2013.
It's like clockwork almost, and that's where things get really interesting, right?
How so?
Well, with these dynasties comes a sense of the system. The established order, both Kama and Kenyatta, despite their family legacies, had controversies surrounding their presidencies.
Controversies? Like what specifically?
Allegations of crony capitalism, prioritizing their own interests, and that's when you see the rise of this hustler narrative.
Ah, the hustler versus the system. That's a powerful narrative.
And it played out in both countries, with Masisi in Botswana and Ruto in Kenya both positioned themselves as outsiders, fighting against that established order, what some call the deep state.
The deep state. Now, that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the source doesn't explicitly define it, does it?
Not really.
No, it seems to be used to describe this network of influential figures, institutions, and maybe even economic interests that maintain the status quo.
So like the powers that be, the ones who benefit from the existing system.
Exactly. And the idea is that these forces work behind the scenes to protect their own power, even if it means undermining elected officials.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy accusation.
It is. And it makes both Masisi and Ruto's victories all the more surprising. They both managed to overcome the system, at least for a time. But then the source brings up this crucial point. Masisi's victory might have been short-lived. His popularity really tanked.
Boy, what happened?
Well, the source points to economic troubles and allegations of authoritarianism.
That doesn't sound good. And that's where the alarm bells start ringing for Ruto, right?
Right. Is he on a similar path? Kenya is facing its own economic challenges. There are whispers of corruption, and there's this idea that he might be alienating certain groups.
So the question is, are these signs that he's heading for the same fate as Masisi?
That's what we need to figure out. But before we dive deeper, let me quickly remind everyone to subscribe to FMKE News on YouTube and hit that notification bell if you're watching this on Facebook or TikTok. Make sure to search for FMKE News on YouTube for more fascinating content covering politics, sports, and scientific research. We truly appreciate your continued support. Now back to our deep dive. What exactly led to Masisi's downfall in Botswana, and could those same factors be at play in Kenya? That's what we'll explore in our next segment.
Okay, so Masisi's downfall, the source paints a pretty stark picture.
Stark how?
Well, the economy was a major factor. Youth unemployment in Botswana was sky high, like something like 45%. And while the global diamond market slump didn't help, Masisi got a lot of the blame.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. If the economy is struggling, people tend to blame the leader.
Right, and he promised diversification during his campaign, but it seems like he didn't really deliver on that.
So not following through on those economic promises, that's never a good look for an incumbent, is it?
Not at all. And the source also mentions his leadership style becoming a problem.
Like he rubbed people the wrong way.
Yeah, basically he's accused of being authoritarian, pushing people away instead of bringing them together.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Well, the arrest warrant for his predecessor, Ian Khama, is a prime example.
Oh, wow. So he had his predecessor basically arrested.
Yeah, it forced Khama into exile, and it really alienated a lot of people, especially within Khama's own Bamangwato tribe.
Oh, so it wasn't just a symbolic thing. It had real political consequences.
Absolutely. That tribe was a key support base for Masisi's party, and he basically pushed them away.
Talk about a self-inflicted wound.
Right. And on top of all that, there were the corruption allegations.
Of course, it's like the classic trifecta of things that can bring down a leader. Economic struggles, a heavy-handed approach, and then questions about whether they're in it for themselves.
It's almost like a playbook, and the question that keeps coming back to me is Ruto falling into those same traps?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about Kenya having its own economic issues, but how do those issues compare to what Botswana was facing? Are they similar in scale, in nature?
Good question. And what about the specifics of Ruto's policies? How do they compare to Masisi's approach?
Yeah, that's where the analysis gets really interesting. We can't just say, oh, both countries had economic trouble, so Ruto's doomed. We have to dig deeper.
Agreed. So what were the specific policies that Masisi enacted or failed to enact that led to those problems? And are there similarities in what Ruto is doing or not doing?
And I think it's important to remember that context matters, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One key difference to consider is the structure of the two economies. Botswana is heavily reliant on diamonds, which made them incredibly vulnerable to that global price drop. Kenya's economy is more diversified.
Right. More diverse, but that doesn't mean it's immune to problems, does it?
Not at all. The rising cost of living and unemployment. These are issues that Ruto needs to address head on.
Absolutely. But the source also raises concerns about his methods. How is he tackling these issues? Is it in a way that benefits everyone? Or is there a sense that he's favoring certain groups, maybe even enriching himself or his allies in the process?
Yeah, those are tough questions, but they're the ones that voters will be asking.
And the source brings up another parallel, that idea of potentially alienating key constituencies. Masisi lost the support of that Bamangwato tribe, and now there are concerns that Ruto might be doing the same with the Kikuyu community in Kenya.
The Kikuyu, that's a significant voting bloc, right?
They were a crucial part of his coalition in 2022. If he loses their support, that could be a huge blow to his re-election chances.
For sure. It all goes back to that idea of leadership style. Is Ruto governing in a way that brings people together, or is he creating divisions?
Right. Is he truly representing the interests of all Kenyans, or is he prioritizing the needs of a select few? These are the kind of questions that voters will be asking themselves as we get closer to 2027.
You got it. And that's why this Botswana case study is so fascinating. It shows us what can make or break a hustler president.
We've got the economy leadership style, this potential for alienating key groups. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it highlights the point that just because someone comes to power by challenging the system doesn't mean they're automatically immune to the same pitfalls.
Right. Power can be seductive, and it's easy to lose sight of those promises made on the campaign trail.
Absolutely. So the big question becomes, can Ruto learn from Masisi's mistakes? Can he avoid falling into the same traps? Or is he, as the source suggests, already heading down that same slippery slope? We'll explore that in our final segment.
All right, so we're back, and we've been looking at these interesting parallels between the political paths of Botswana and Kenya. It's really fascinating stuff.
It is, isn't it? Both countries have these hustler leaders who came in promising change, Masisi and Ruto.
Right, and as we saw with Masisi, things didn't exactly go as planned. So the question is, can Ruto learn from Masisi's mistakes, or is he on track for a similar outcome?
Yeah, the Botswana case study, it's almost like a cautionary tale. It shows us some potential pitfalls that Ruto really needs to avoid, and the source actually points to 3 key areas he should focus on.
Okay, 3 key areas. Let's hear them. What's the first one?
The economy, of course, we know that PL played a huge role in Masisi's downfall. He promised diversification, but didn't really seem to deliver.
Right, so what's the lesson there for Ruto?
Well, it's not enough just to make promises. He needs to show actual results, things that people can see and feel in their own lives.
So tangible economic improvements, focusing on cost of living, creating jobs, making sure the benefits of growth actually reach ordinary Kenyans.
Exactly, making good on those campaign promises. That's key. And then there's the issue of leadership style.
Oh, right. Masisi was criticized for being too authoritarian, alienating key groups like that Bamangwato tribe.
Exactly. So Ruto needs to take a different approach. He needs to be more inclusive, build bridges, listen to dissenting voices.
So bringing people together instead of pushing them away, it's about unity and also about transparency and accountability, especially when it comes to those allegations of corruption.
Absolutely. Masisi was plagued by those suspicions of self-dealing. And that really eroded public trust. Ruto can't afford to make those same mistakes.
So we've got the economy, leadership style, and transparency. If Ruto can get those right, maybe, just maybe, he can avoid the fate that befell Masisi.
It's not a guarantee, of course, but it at least shows that he's aware of the potential pitfalls and that he's willing to learn from the experiences of others.
And that's really the point of this whole deep dive, isn't it? It's not about predicting the future. It's about understanding the challenges that Ruto faces and the choices he has to make.
It's about recognizing those patterns in history and asking ourselves what can be done to break the cycle and avoid repeating those mistakes.
Well said. So where does that leave us? I mean, we've explored some fascinating parallels between Botswana and Kenya, and it's clear that Ruto has his work cut out for him.
For sure, the future of Kenya is still being written, but by studying history, we can get a better sense of the forces at play and the choices that lie ahead. The Botswana example, it's a valuable roadmap, not just for Ruto, but for any leader facing similar challenges.
And it's a reminder that we as citizens, we have a role to play too. We need to hold our leaders accountable, make sure they're actually working in our best interests.
Couldn't agree more. The power ultimately rests with the people. It's our voices, our choices, our demands for accountability that will shape the destiny of Kenya.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and remember to like this video and share it with your friends.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to FMKD News on YouTube and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode.
That's right. And if you're watching on Facebook or TikTok, make sure to search for FMKE News on YouTube. You'll find a ton of informative videos there covering everything from politics to sports to scientific research.
Your support means the world to us, so thanks for tuning in.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.